Hello my bookish friends out there in booktube land, and welcome to another episode of Tristan and the Classics. In this episode I have got 5 classic books which are great. And the better thing about them is I picked them up for £2.50 at a charity shop. So in some respects this video is an ode to the charity shop or the thrift store or whatever you want to call it. So without further ado, let's get stuck in, shall we? Our first book up on the list is the hilarious Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons. If you've never read this, you've got to read it. If you like things like James Herriot, you know, the All Creatures Great and Small, you're going to love this. And if you just like rural gossip, rural country politics, and sort of where everyone in the village, the small things that they do are so big to them because they've never been in a city. And what Stella Gibbons does in this is she sort of humorizes the characters. She really focuses in on each individual's particular peculiarity. So the story follows Flora Post. She's 19 years old and she's orphaned. Now she starts in London and she seems quite sophisticated, but because she's orphaned, she's got to go and find family to live with. And so she finds out that there's part of her family is in rural Sussex, which is south of England. I don't know why I had to hesitate there. And they live at a place called Cold Comfort Farm, and their names are the Stark Adders, which is, you know, a good humorous name. Now when Flora gets there, she suddenly finds all this array of quirky characters. So you've got Judith, who is totally depressed over some past act of wickedness that she can't shake from her mind. And then you've got, who else have you got? Amos. So funny because it's a minor prophet's name in the Bible, and the minor prophets tend to be known for being quite zealous. Well, Amos himself is full of blood and thunder and eternal damnation and hellfire. You've got Seth, who's a bit of a lusty fellow, you know, he really likes the girls. You've got Mr. Oh, not maybe. Mayfly. No, I can't remember his name now, but he's there. Claude. You've got Aunt Doom, who saw something awful in the woodshed. You know, you've got all these different characters. Now, what Flora thinks she can do is get them in hand and sort of sophisticate them, make them more sophisticated. And she tries to arrange things, which is a classic rural comedy setup. You think of something like, I know it's not as comic, but Emma by Pride and Prejudice. Emma tries to arrange Harriet's love life and it doesn't go to plan, but this has got the farcical about it. It's a parody of life in the country. And this one, I'm so pleased to get this because the last time I read it, it was on Kindle. Now I've got it in the beautiful Penguins Modern Classics, the one that always have the blue on the back. These are lovely books. So I'm itching to read this again with my wife, who loved it the last time we went through it. The opening paragraph reads this way. The education bestowed on Flora Post by her parents had been expensive, athletic, and prolonged. And when they died within a few weeks of one another during the annual epidemic of the influenza or Spanish plague, which occurred in her 20th year, she was discovered to possess every art and grace, save that of earning her own living. So it's a very light touch style of writing, and we've got that juxtaposition of being educated and athletic and all the things that should make you a great sophisticated person, but she can't earn a living. So, you know, she has a flaw in herself. So there it is, Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons. Our second book slides us down the scale from farce comedy down to the very deep and introspective, darkened world of obsession and darker motivations in characters. And it is Iris Murdoch's The Sea, The Sea. This, what's 18th, 19th book Murdoch wrote, and it's classed as the magnum opus, Murdoch's magnum opus. So what you've got in this is Charles Araby. He is a former actor, playwright, and director in London with the big plays. And he wants to give it all up. He's in his 60s. He wants to turn his back on society, civilization. He wants to escape from all that, especially from women. And so he goes away and he takes up living almost a hermit's life by the sea in a small home. Except he meets Mary Fitch. And the problem here is she was his old flame when he was an adolescent. And if you remember anything about your own adolescence, the people you fall in love with, they strike so deep when you're young that you can't ever shake the memory. And because of that, he starts obsessing over the old memory, and he wants to start a relationship with her, and they should get married, even though they're both much, much older now. That's what he's sort of fixated on, and she's a bit resistant to that. And it follows his schemes to sort of bring that to fruition. I won't give anything away of some of the interesting bits that happen, but what it focuses on is that, I mean, for chapters on end, he goes on about analysing how he used to feel about the old reality, and then he becomes sort of reflective over how he's handled the situation. You've got other characters in this, like his cousin James, who's a Buddhist. He turns up, but he's sort of very morose. And the characters each are motivated, or a lot of them are motivated by negative emotions, negative qualities, anger, jealousy, bitterness, despite the fact they put on a better show to the world, like we all do. And that's what this book will follow. So it is a real exploration of being human. But remember, when you read this, there are characters that you're not going to get on with them. They might irk you, might be worse than that. But try not to take your personality to them and be like, why aren't you like me? Rather, as Harold Bloom said, stand within the pages and let the pages impress upon you. Hold back judgment, like Anthony Trollope, who didn't judge his characters, and see what this book does to you. So that's the sea. I'll just open it and let's see what the first paragraph says. So it's a prehistory. The sea which lies before me as I write glows rather than... Oh, I'll start that again. The sea which lies before me as I write glows rather than sparkles in the bland May sunshine. With the tide turning, it leans quietly against the land, almost unflecked by ripples or by foam. Near to the horizon, it is a luxurious purple, spotted with regular lines of emerald green. At the horizon, it is indigo. Near to the shore, where my view is framed by rising heaps of humpy yellow rock, there is a band of lighter green, icy and pure, less radiant, opaque, however, not transparent. We are in the north, and the bright sunshine cannot penetrate the sea. Where the gentle water taps the rocks, there is still a surface skin of colour. The cloudless sky is very pale at the indigo horizon, which it lightly pencils in with silver. Its blue gains towards the zenith and vibrates there, but the sky looks cold. Even the sun looks cold. So that's our first paragraph, very atmospheric and describing the sea, of course. Our third book in this haul is a different genre again, and we're moving to the high drama romance slash gothic, although not as gothic as some of our authoress's other works. This is Daphne du Maurier's Frenchman's Creek, and this is the Virago modern classic. I do like the Virago modern classics. Their designs on the front are very good, and I've got another du Maurier's there. Can you see Jamaica Inn? They sort of go with each other. They're the only two in Virago I've got. Jamaica Inn, of course, being her most famous work. Probably of late, the most famous is Rebecca, thanks to the Netflix film, which I thought was rather good, to be quite honest. And then My Cousin Rachel, people know that. The Scapegoat, less well known. This one, not quite as gothic as some of the others. So what you've got, this is set in the time of Charles II. So that's going to place you in the 17th century, the 1600s. Now, for a start, that is quite a unique thing. You don't get too many books set in that period. 18th century, yes, especially up towards the French Revolution. 19th century, absolutely. Tudors, which is the 16th century, but not the 17th. And yet it was such a phenomenal age, like really interesting things going on. Books that are in that area, Lorna Doone, that would be one of them by Blackmore. On a modern feel, no, even that's not the 16th, that's not the 17th century. I was going to say Poldark, but that's more early 18th, so close. Anyway, the story of Frenchman's Creek. Frenchman's Creek is an area in Cornwall. This is where Du Maurier sets most of her works. Rebecca, yeah, even Rebecca, he ends up in Cornwall, doesn't he? That's where she goes. Du Maurier does with Cornwall what Hardy does with Wessex. Now, the story follows Donna Lady St. Column, and she's in the royal court of Charles II, but she is fatigued and bored with it. It's just so structured and ever the same, and all the politics. She's good at politicking, but you know, she can't be doing with it. What she yearns for is adventure, of life, to experience and taste excitement. And so she eventually moves away from the court and goes back to the old family home in Cornwall, only to find it's dilapidated because it hasn't been lived in a long time, and it's now being used by a pirate. There is a pirate ship that is sort of based around there. And the captain of the pirate is, oh, what's his name? Jean Benoit Aubrey is his name. But the thing about him, he's not just a rake. He's not just a commoner that's become a pirate. He's a gentleman who also, like Donna, is sick of how everyone behaves, sick of the boring life, and he wants adventure. And so we get a romance begin. Now, I'm not going to say hardly anything else about this book. Du Maurier writes at a galloping pace. She's very quick at developing her story, getting into sort of action and intrigue. And as is her way, because of the Gothic sort of nature, there is that classic dramatic fork in the road where Donna's going to have to make a decision. I'm not going to tell you what that decision is, because it would spoil the book, really. But she has to make a decision. So you get that point of high drama, okay? And so that's Frenchman's Creek. I don't know if you've read any other Du Maurier. Actually, I really think a great video would be a video about Du Maurier's works. Maybe a comparison of them all or a ranking of them all, I don't know. But anyway, that's Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier, and it starts with this paragraph. When the east wind blows up Helford River, the shining waters become troubled and disturbed, and the little waves beat angrily upon the sandy shores. The short seas break above the bar at ebb tide, and the waders fly inland to the mudflats, their wings skimming the surface and calling to one another as they go. Only the gulls remain, wheeling and crying above the foam, diving now and again in search of food, their grey feathers glistening with the salt spray. Very evocative writing, isn't it? It's beautiful. So a good atmospheric writer. Daphne du Maurier's Frenchman's Creek. Our next book goes back into the comedy realm, but not into farcical, not quite as far as parody, but still fun. If you think of Elizabeth Gaskell's Cranford, where you've got all the gossiping women, it's, you know, village politics again. And because of the small village, any activities are sort of magnified and embellished, and characters stand out a bit starker. That's what you're going to get in this book. But it's written so well because it's written by a great Anthony Trollope, and it is Barchester Towers. This is the second in the Barsetshire Chronicles, 6 books in all. Starts with The Warden, which I know a lot of you have already read, and it follows on from that story. Time has passed, and what's happened is Dr. Grantley, whose father-in-law used to be whose father was the bishop of Barchester Cathedral, he expects to be made bishop next. But instead, a Dr. Proudie is made bishop. And the worst thing about this is Proudie comes from low church. Grantley is high church, and he as a character is very overbearing, very bombastic, dogmatic, opinionated, brusque, and arrogant, to be fair. Although his wife has a funny effect on him. It's always funny seeing how she can tame him. And so it's a bit of a shock that he doesn't get picked as bishop. Now also, if you've read The Warden, the one that comes before this, in the church lands there is an institution called Hiram's Hospital, where a few beadsmen stay there. That means old men who are retired, they don't have much money, and so they stay on the church land and they get given a stipend, not too much. And there's another man there who he expects to become in charge of that, and his name's Slope. He's the chaplain. And he wanted to be over Hiram's Hospital because you get quite a nice little pension for running that thing. And what happens is we begin a sort of very scheming, politicking activity between Slope, who disagrees with Grantley not being bishop and is bitter for not being picked to run Hiram's Hospital, and Mrs. Proudie, who is more adept at manipulating the system and scheming and plotting than her husband, the new bishop. And so begins this infighting brawl, now I've got to say this, Barchester is not a big city. Because you think of cathedral, you think big city. Barchester is small. It's a small town. And people know each other. And so all of the activity around the cathedral, remembering church life was central in these days, everyone has an opinion and opinions run high. And everything seems so important. And that's what sort of makes the comedy aspect to this. However, what I've got to say about Trollope is he doesn't really write humours like Dickens or, you know, we just mentioned Cold Comfort Farm. They're sort of humorised characters because they are stamped with a particular trait. Now, if you want to know about humours in literature, and it's really fascinating to know if you want to appreciate literature, watch my video. I've got one recently on it, you know, understanding the humours. But Anthony Trollope, he's got such a straightforward, almost everyday way of writing. There's nothing convoluted about his style. And it's very easy to read. The other thing about Trollope that I love about this author, he doesn't judge his characters. He's exceptional at keeping out of the way. Any judgments you can tell are coming from the attitude of others. He himself doesn't really paint villains because in life you generally don't have real villains, do you? Dickens, absolutely full of like terrible villains. They're accentuated. Even Hardy, his villains, you know they're pretty bad. But Trollope, no. Trollope likes to be fair to people and doesn't judge them. He lets you do that. And a lot of his stuff was taken actually from the news of the time. He made things recognisable. Actually, what's happened here is the Low Church guy, Dr. Proudie, he's been established as the bishop because of politics. The Whig government wants to promote Low Church. So Trollope took this from real life kind of thing and he writes it and people could reflect well. So if you want to get familiar with the 19th century, actually Trollope is a great guy to read. Let's just open with the brilliant small paragraph, which explains his style very, very, very well. Chapter 1, Who will be the new bishop? In the latter days of July in the year 18, a most important question was for 10 days hourly asked in the cathedral city of Barchester, and answered every hour in various ways. Who was to be the new bishop? What a brilliant opening. Catches your attention. It does say Barchester is a city. I've always seen it as a town, but it says in the Warden that Barchester is not a particularly sprawling metropolis. And that sort of condenses the attitudes and actions and dispositions of people, which makes it quite entertaining. It allows you to get embedded in the society. And of course, it runs on after this one for another 4 books, 6 in total. Our last book is by an author I have never read anything by, and was written in 1989. It won the Booker Prize. This author is renowned for being a great author. Technically, this will stand outside my criteria of a classic because it's too recent. Now, before you judge me, watch my video on what is a classic, because I explain why I put a certain age on things. Age does not make a classic, but I do believe to know that something is classic, it has to last a number of generations to prove its sticking power. Universal themes are great, but not all of them stick. So time is the test of that to a large degree. And anyway, this book is Never Let Me Go by Katsuo Ishiguro. So his most famous work, of course, being Remains of the Day, which I also haven't read and have got. I've just never got round to reading it. I've been told Remains of the Day is phenomenal. I know this book got like major accolades and still is thought of highly. I'll read the back of this one because I didn't do any research on it. In one of the most acclaimed and original novels of recent years, Katsuo Ishiguro imagines the lives of a group of students growing up in a darkly skewed version of contemporary England. Narrated by Kathy, now 31, Never Let Me Go hauntingly dramatizes her attempts to come to terms with her childhood and the seemingly idyllic Hailsham School, and with the fate that has always awaited her and her closest friends in the wider world. A story of love, friendship, and memory, Never Let Me Go is charged throughout with a sense of the fragility of life. Now, there's some things that appeal to me about this. You know, looking down, okay, it says a gothic tour de force. I do love a good bit of gothic. However, fragility of life nearly always makes for the best thought-provoking books. The reason for that, all life is fragile. Now, I don't know in what sense this is going to prove fragility of life. However, we are all transient. Time, if you go through all literature from like way back, time is the dominant theme of the great works. You think of Shakespeare, you know, time comes creeping on with its petty pace. You think of Proverbs in the scriptures about, you know, life is a blossom and a mere wind has to pass and away it goes. Time, when we get to look at that, and especially it says memory here, memory is very evocative because memory is the strong impressions we have of life. When you put that together, it wells up within you as a reader, because we recognize it in ourselves. And what time does, and memory, is it forces us to focus sort of our life under a lens and see that we are just moving along and that many have come before us, many come after us. And it causes you to slow down in this, you know, busy, helter-skelter, jog-trotty world and stop and think about things, really make sense of your own place and appreciating life and looking for true meaning in life, not frittering it away, but actually taking the time to find what is true happiness, what is the purpose, all that kind of stuff. And so in that respect, this appeals to me quite a lot. And also being dark, I do like a bit of dark every now and then. Now this one opens with this paragraph. It's quite a long one. So chapter 1. My name is Kathy H, so we're first person, that's interesting. I'm 31 years old, and I've been a carer now for over 11 years. That sounds long enough, I know, but actually they want me to go on for another 8 months until the end of this year. That'll make it almost exactly 12 years. Now I know my being a carer so long isn't necessarily because they think I'm fantastic at what I do. There are some really good carers who've been told to stop after just 2 or 3 years. And I can think of one carer at least who went on for all of 14 years despite being a complete waste of space. So I'm not trying to boast. But then I do know for a fact they've been pleased with my work, and by and large I have too. My donors have always tended to do much better than expected. Their recovery times have been impressive, and hardly any of them have been classified as agitated even before 4th donation. Okay, maybe I am boasting now, but it means a lot to me being able to do my work well, especially that bit about my donors staying calm. I've developed a kind of instinct around donors. I know when to hang around and comfort them, when to leave them to themselves, when to listen to everything they have to say, and when just to shrug and tell them to snap out of it. Whew. I like that opening. There's a lot to be appreciated there. We already are drawn to the character. This is one of the things, if you're going to get any kind of book, you have to care about the character. And this was open. We've got a back history. We've got the fact that she's a carer. She is a little pleased with her work. She's admitted. She's sort of got a reticence, trying not to boast, but then admitting. So she's an open character. The use of the word donor, interesting use of word. So how that will develop, I'm not sure. But that was really good. I really like that. Have you ever read this? Anyone? Leave a comment below. And in fact, that goes for all of them. Have you read any of them, or which one of them stands out to you? Please leave comments, like, subscribe. If you love the classics, this is the channel that I hope you will be really drawn to, because we don't just look at book hauls. We go deep into reviewing books and not just saying I like this character and that, but really looking at the themes and ideas behind the books themselves and what lessons we can draw out of them. So I I'm interested to see what you think. And until the next time I make a video, I wish you joy in your reading.